Good morning, and welcome to the Global Current. I'm Alex Krause.
And I'm Dominique DiMarzio.
First in news, Greece reaches a bailout compromise with the EU.
The UK identifies prominent ISIS member Jihadi John.
In analysis, the Japanese Crown Prince speaks against growing militarism.
The new implications of Turkey's arms agreements with China.
And the Global Current sits down with Ambassador Leno Gutierrez on his career in the Foreign Service and the current events in Argentina.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
And now, Karina Hendren reports on the recent compromise between Greece and the EU regarding a Greek bailout.
On Tuesday, Eurozone officials approved a 4-month extension of the Greece bailout loans, reports The Guardian. Greece's new finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, sent this plan to Brussels, which included some campaign pledges of the newly elected Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. The plan also includes measures to combat tax evasion and corruption, reform public sector wages, introduce collective bargaining, and achieve pension savings. Tsipras, who was elected in January, is the leader of the Syriza movement, which is a left-wing coalition. The New York Times reported that the 4-month extension will approve a loan of 240 billion euros, approximately $272 billion US dollars. However, the loan plan requires Greece to raise taxes and cut spending, which has depressed Greece's economy. According to the New York Times, many Greeks have blamed the current crisis on the austerity budget requirement of the bailout program. However, for Tsipras, it has been difficult to meet the demands of the European creditors without opposing the anti-austerity measures on which he based his campaign. The document sent in by Varoufakis has been referred to as a starting point and is discussed here by Eurozone President and Dutch Finance Minister Jeroen Dijsselbloem.
This list is just an indication of the kind of reforms that they would like to push, like to replace, and also the ones that they would like to continue. And it's going to take time to really get into the details and to design a new contract or agreement which will carry us on for 4 months.
Reuters reports that as a result of the release of the plan, Greek markets saw a 7% increase in share prices. The plan proposed by Tsipras and Varoufakis is still facing heavy criticism from other members in the EU, as well as those in the ECB and the IMF. On Tuesday, the Slovakian finance minister tweeted, "Greeks have a lot of heavy lifting to do until end April. We all want to see numbers now." The Guardian reports that the ECB complained that the commitments outlined by the Greek authorities differ from existing program commitments. Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, stated, "We consider such undertakings critical. In quite a few areas, including perhaps the most important ones, the Greek letter is not conveying clear assurances." At this moment, the Greeks still have 7.2 billion euros to be tapped from bailout funds and have another 10 billion euros that is reserved by the Europeans after recapitalizing of Greek banks. The Guardian also reports that Athens has to make large debt repayments next month and that Tsipras is under pressure to start negotiations on a third program for bigger debt repayments in July. This is Karina Hendren for the Global Current.
Mallory Finch reports on the UK's new discovery of the identity of prominent ISIS member Jihadi John.
Jihadi John is a member of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. He appeared in videos beheading American hostages in 2014 and also in 2015. His identity has finally been discovered. The BBC News reports that his name is Mohammed Emwazi. According to the Washington Post, officials use voice analysis technology and former hostages to identify him. He was born in Kuwait, he is in his mid-20s, and grew up in West London. Those that knew him described him as polite and always observant of the tenets of Islam. He even once worked for British security services. Prime Minister David Cameron addressed the public discussing Jihadi John.
People across this country will have been sickened by the fact that it could have been a British citizen who could have carried out this unspeakable act. It is the very opposite of everything our country stands for.
His first appearance was in a video found in August where he murdered James Foley, a journalist from the U.S. He appeared in another earlier this year. In the videos, he wears a black robe and a black balaclava that covers his entire face except his eyes. He mocks leaders while holding a knife to the heads of those he captured, then slitting their throats. In his latest video, he announces that he and 2 others form a section of ISIS called the Beatles, whose mission is to directly attack the West. Asim Kiersi, a research director of CAGE, a human rights group based out of London, has been in communication with Mwazi for several years. He describes him as extremely kind, gentle, and soft-spoken, the most humble young person I know. Kiersi cannot with 100% certainty say that Mwazi is Jihadi John. He expressed that Mwazi had mentioned difficulties with his security service job. In May 2009, during a trip to Tanzania to go on a safari, he and a friend were stopped and detained by police. He was accused of trying to get to the terrorist group Al-Shabaab in Somalia. When questioned, he did say that the group tried to recruit him, but he turned them down. This was not the last time Mwazi would be accused of being part of a terrorist group. According to the BBC, he was investigated in 2010 under suspicion of being part of another terrorist group, M15. Officials are now trying to locate him. This has been Mallory Finch for the Global Current.
Blythe Brady discusses how the Japanese Crown Prince has spoken out against the growth in national militarism.
On Monday, to mark his 55th birthday, Prince Naruhito spoke to a news conference where he criticized a change in Japanese attitudes towards World War II memory. In August, Japan will mark the 70th anniversary of its surrender to the United States, which ended the Pacific stage of the Second World War. With this on the minds of the Japanese people, the Crown Prince's speech came at a potent time. The BBC reports that in his speech, Prince Naruhito expressed that it is important to, quote, look back humbly on the past and correctly pass on the tragic experiences and history Japan pursued, end quote. Additionally, he spoke of the importance to pass on the memories of the war to the next generation, which had no direct knowledge of the war. Asia Heartbeat reports that this statement is set to send shockwaves through the current right-wing administration led by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
I think that it is important to correctly pass on the tragic experiences and history Japan pursued from the generation which experienced the war to those without direct knowledge. After going through a disastrous war, Japan is maintaining peace and prosperity under the Constitution.
Prince Naruhito's remarks come on the heels of years of evasion and aggression on the part of Japan when it comes to its role in World War II. Japanese textbooks have been accused of whitewashing the atrocities committed by Japan. The textbooks are not written under direct government supervision or published by the state. Instead, the state publishes guidelines which are then used by commercial publishers to write the textbooks, according to Japan Focus. The state guidelines over the past 50 years have placed special emphasis on the teaching about sensitive issues, such as the Asia-Pacific War from 1931 to 1945. This has concerned foreign publics because it appears to obscure the role of Japan in the war, including human atrocities committed by the Japanese military. Additionally, Prime Minister Abe has taken the public stance of professing a milder version of the history of the first half of the 20th century. His right-wing nationalist supporters have worked to glorify Japan as a strong country, while downplaying many of the aggressive actions taken by the country in the past. In particular, Abe has headed a drive to minimize the institutionalized system of wartime sex slavery which Japan practiced during World War II in China and the Koreas, according to The Guardian. The Crown Prince's speech has been seen as a rebuke to Abe's attitudes on this issue, especially on the eve of the 70th anniversary. Last week, Abe appointed a 16-member panel to advise him on the official statement to mark the anniversary, in which some commentators suspect he will downplay the system of comfort women, as the sex slaves were called. Amid growing anger in China and South Korea, including demands for reparations to the surviving comfort women, it seems likely that Abe will skim over the issue in his upcoming speech. The panel will also be tasked to examine the previous apologies issued by Japan for acts committed during the war. In Japan, the accusations of Japanese soldiers utilizing sex slaves in China and the Korean peninsula has become increasingly controversial. Some right-wing ideologues have insisted that there is no proof that the Japanese state or its military were involved in the system, and they reject the official expressions of guilt offered by the Japanese state over the years, according to Al Jazeera. With this atmosphere and Abe's professed stance, China and South Korea will be awaiting the anniversary speech. The textbooks and the denial by some of the Japanese community of past war atrocities reveals a tension running through Japanese society. Prince Naruhito's speech shows the need for balanced remembrance in the wake of war. With the upcoming anniversary of the surrender in World War II, The direction Japan will take in the future could be highlighted in the coming months. Reading for Blythe Brady, this is Bill Golba on The Global Current.
And now, Vaughn Rogers analyzes the strategic implications of Turkey and China's newest arms agreements.
Turkey purchased a Chinese-constructed missile defense system back in 2013, according to The Diplomat. But now, Turkey is rethinking the deal with one of China's largest providers of weapons, Chinese defense company China Precision Machinery Export-Import Corporation, or CP-MAKE. The Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan stated that disagreements have emerged with China on issues of joint production and know-how during negotiations over the missile defense system, implying that other issues are involved with the purchase. And there are. Turkey, a founding member of NATO, possesses defense systems used in many countries in Europe that are largely incompatible with the Chinese systems. Another elephant in the room is the U.S. sanction against CP-MAKE dating back to 1993 for giving missile technology to Pakistan. CP-MAKE has as recently as February come under fire for giving illegal items banned under U.S. law, thus inducing more sanctions. CP-MAKE was formerly known as the Ministry of Space Industry, MSI, but has evolved to make missiles, even weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs. Part of dealing with China would mean that Turkey would have to pay for other amenities, like integration of China's network with that of NATO. This final conundrum concerns NATO the most. The eventual integration of defense systems into the NATO network presents a security risk. Recently, Turkey has been building its business with China totaling nearly $50 billion this year, double that of last year, and has been planning visits to China's Xinjiang province, where the majority of the population is Muslim. As a NATO ally, Turkey needs to keep in mind its allegiance to the various other countries near it, especially since its neighbors like Russia, Afghanistan, and Syria are either in turmoil or challenging the Western powers. Can Turkey afford to spend so much on missiles for the sake of principle? Syrian refugees have been pouring in since the civil war began, and Mosul, so close to Turkish soil, has been taken by ISIS. Could Turkey put the saved billions to good use protecting the home front? The sure thing is that if the Prime Minister does not consent to this deal with China, the repercussions may fall heavily on Turkey's relationship with NATO allies. With the disruption in Asia and in Eastern Europe, Turkey will need protection and support from its allies in order to stave off ISIS or civil wars bleeding over into its borders. If Turkey goes ahead with the deal, it will be the first NATO country to do business with China in this way. This is Vaughn Rogers reporting for The Global Current.
Finally, associate producer Daniel Garay sits down with former ambassador to Argentina and Nicaragua, Leno Gutierrez, on his experience in the Foreign Service and current issues in Argentina.
Thank you, Ambassador Gutierrez, for agreeing to have an interview, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, how long did you serve in the State Department, and where exactly did you serve?
Well, I served from 1977 to 2006, around 29 years, and I served in 7 different countries and tours in Washington, D.C. as well. I can name some of the countries if you like. The Dominican Republic, Portugal. I was in Paris, France. I was in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, Nassau, Bahamas, and I was ambassador to Nicaragua and Argentina.
And what year did you begin serving in the State Department?
It was in 1977. I had finished my master's in Latin American Studies at the University of Alabama.
Now, you're from Cuba, correct?
I was born in Havana, Cuba. That's right.
And as a Cuban American, what was it like being a Hispanic in the State Department at that time?
Well, there weren't many of us. The Foreign Service had traditionally been a very elite institution, an elite club, and most of Foreign Service officers had come from the eastern part of the U.S., many from the Ivy League institutions. But by the 1970s, it had started to diversify a bit. So I was one of the few Hispanics. I think there were maybe 5% of the officers at that time were Hispanic.
And tell us a little about how the diversity of the State Department has changed since then.
Well, in some ways, it has improved quite a bit. today, up to 40% up to 40 or 42% of all officers are women. The African American totals have gone up, and other minority groups and affinity groups. But unfortunately, in the case of Hispanics, the totals have improved only slightly, and for some reason, they have not been as successful in recruiting Hispanics as they could have.
Any thoughts on why this is so?
Maybe because the Hispanics that arrive in the States as immigrants often are thinking about helping those left behind, and the careers that their parents instill on them are to be doctors, lawyers, teachers, etc. And they don't think about diplomacy or representing the U.S., but that's something that we hope will change in the next few years.
And you served as ambassador to Argentina from 2003 to 2006.
That's right.
As ambassador to Argentina, how was the political climate in that country, and how is it different from today?
Well, when I arrived, they had just recovered from the worst economic crisis in their history. Argentina has traditionally been one of the richest countries of South America. And in 2002 and 2003, they defaulted on their debt. They had to devalue their currency. A lot of factories closed down. Investment slowed down to a trickle. And it was a very difficult time for them. But they were starting to recover because it's such a rich country agriculturally. And they have a very good educated populace, good workforce. So they were starting to come back in 2003 thanks to international commodity prices like soybeans and beef, etc., which are some of their traditional exports. The president at that time, Nestor Kirchner, however, decided to adopt populist policies denouncing the Western countries and the institutions like the International Monetary Fund and others. So they drifted away from the United States a bit, and that process has continued until today, when our relations are not very close, although the links between the Argentine people and the American people are still very strong, because they go back many years, and we became independent about the same time. So there are many Argentines in the U.S., and the U.S. is still seen as a standard in the hemisphere, so many Argentines want to travel to the U.S. and get to experience it.
So you served your post when the prior Kirchner, the late Nestor Kirchner, was in office. You said how he basically denounced Western countries and institutions. So how were the relations between the U.S. and Argentina? What were the state of those relations at that time?
Well, on the one hand, this was after 9/11, and Argentina did help and cooperate on the war on terrorism. So there was good cooperation at the working level. And their foreign ministry worked very well with us on many issues. They were on the Security Council, I remember, at this time, and we coordinated pretty well. But then the rhetoric sort of got away from them, and President Kirchner became closer to people like Hugo Chavez and Evo Morales in Bolivia, and those people who are traditional anti-American or adopted anti-American policies. So our relations became very strained.
So as ambassador to that country, how did it feel being in this kind of social and political atmosphere where these relations were strained? Was it awkward in any way? Did you have to watch what you do in, any sort of way?
Well, in Argentina, relations are always tricky because there is a history of misunderstanding, and certainly the post-World War II period was very strained when Juan Perón became president. And there was an American ambassador then who was very much an interventionist and was in the newspaper every day denouncing the government. So there is that precedent. So no U.S. ambassador wants to be tagged with the same, title as Mr. Braden, who was the ambassador, who was the interventionist. So U.S. ambassadors in Argentina are more circumspect, I think, just respecting the history and the sensibilities. Now, in this case, I had no problems, talking to the ordinary people of Argentina and in any of my appearances. But certainly when I discussed international issues at the foreign ministry or with the president, I could see we did not see eye to eye, and we did not see the world through the same prism.
Now, the latest political scandal to rock Argentina is obviously the suspicious death of Alberto Nisman, a prosecutor who was basically accusing the current president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, of conspiring with Iran to cover up their role in this bombing of a Jewish center in 1994. Now, to a lot of people, this is a very shocking story to start off with. But as the former ambassador to that country, what do you think of this scandal, if you have any thoughts on it?
Well, it's very regrettable. I had met Mr. Nisman. He had been appointed as I was leaving, and the reason was that nobody had ever really solved the two bombings in Argentina that took place in 92, which is the Israeli embassy, 94, the Amia Jewish Cultural Center. And he was supposed to be the special prosecutor who finally found the answers because previous investigations had gotten very politicized. And a link had been established to Iran, Iranian diplomats who operated out of the tri-border region. I think that the van that was used in the bombing came from there, was rented there, etc. But Mr. Nisman was still investigating, and it seemed like he had reached, the zenith of his investigation, and was ready to, he had announced that the president had been involved in a cover-up of, dealing with Iran and negotiating, dropping the charges against the Iranian diplomats who had already been charged, and they had Interpol arrest notices, etc., in return for receiving oil at discounted prices and other things. So he was some say he was ready to indict the president. And then he is killed as he's about to make a major announcement the next day and have a press conference the night before, and under very mysterious circumstances. So the question is, did he commit suicide or not? And then the president herself said, I don't think he committed suicide. But of course, she put it in terms that the CIA or Mossad or somebody must have killed him. So that really stirred the pot, and it's really a very unstable situation down there with this powder keg that is still burning and nobody has solved. And so it is regrettable, and it really is a very difficult situation down there.
Now, the protests that this has sparked, you see a massive mobilization of the civilian population in Argentina over this scandal. Have you ever seen such a mobilization of the population like this before?
There have been in the past some. I remember there have been demonstrations against crime, against citizen security. There was a guy named Bloomberg when I was there in the early 2000s who mobilized large crowds because his son had been kidnapped and killed, and the government did not seem to take it seriously. So at that time, there were thousands of people in the street as well. But this one, I think, may have more lasting power because I just don't see how they're going to solve this in the short term.
So that the situation is resolved, this scandal, do you think the president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, is involved somehow?
Well, I mean, the question is who stands to benefit from Mr. Nisman's disappearance, and it's certainly the government. Now, I'm not saying the president herself knew or had anything to do with it, but if she herself says it wasn't a suicide, then you have to ask who did it. And maybe it's somebody who supports the government or works for the government without the knowledge of the president. Maybe it's, there are some popular organizations that support the government. Maybe someone came from there. But it's all speculation at this point. But in these questions, it's all about who stands to benefit here.
And going to another side of Argentina, obviously we know that Argentina is the most diverse of the Latin American states, I would suppose. Lots of European populations. Of course, there's also the Jewish population, and then also with just the normal Hispanic population. What did you think of Argentinian diversity when you were serving in the country?
Well, I think Argentina is similar to the U.S. in that it's a melting pot of, Eastern Europeans, Spaniards. 40% of Argentines have an Italian name, so the Italian population is very prevalent. And, I would travel to the Argentine countryside and find a bunch of blonde, blue-eyed citizens there, and I'd say, where are you guys from? And, oh, my grandfather was from the Ukraine, and there were Welsh farmers in southern Argentina, in the Patagonia. So, and of course, the indigenous population near the Bolivian border is very pronounced. So yes, it's a very diverse country, and it's similar to the U.S. in that it's a melting pot.
And you served a career of 29 years in the Foreign Service. What would you have to say to those individuals who are looking to join the Foreign Service?
I would say to take a look at it to see if it's for you. It's an honor to represent your country overseas. And if you like travel, if you like foreign cultures, if you want to live overseas, learn new skills and put your own skills at work as far as reporting and observing and telling Americans back home what's going on there and working for your government, take a look at the Foreign Service. There are exams given. You can go online at careers@state.gov to take a look at it. There are fellowships, internships, scholarships, etc. And that website has it all. So take a look to see if you're interested.
All right, well, thank you so much, Ambassador Gutierrez. Thank you for your insight on the diversity in the State Department and the current situation in Argentina.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Global Current. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm Dominique DiMarzio.
And I'm Alex Krause.
We'll see you next week.
The Global Current is brought to you by the School of Diplomacy and International Relations at Seton Hall University. Our executive producer is Bill Golba. Our co-executive producers are Daniel Garay and Alicia Sharabali. Our technical producer is Evan Doolittle. Our news and analysis editors are Gabriela Taveras and Catherine Beebe. The theme song is Acid Jazz by Kevin MacLeod. This has been The Global Current on WSOU, Seton Hall's Pirate Radio.